Hello, welcome back. If you'll notice, it's just me right now. Bum, bum, bum. But actually, this week we are bringing a special edition interview. Buckle up with me and join in as I talk to Mike. He'll give himself a bio once we get going, but I have been wanting to talk to him for a while because I worked with him the last 5 years, well, my entire 5 years, the last 4 years. I can't do math. The moral of the story is I started my career working with Mike as he was ending his career in law enforcement and criminal justice. And he was somebody that I always looked to as a mentor because he always just had a really good balance between finding the humanity in somebody and also holding them accountable, advocating for people to have treatment and have access to substance abuse and mental health treatment. When I was working with him, he was specifically labeled as the drug and alcohol treatment officer. So he carried a specialized caseload of folks who had either or substance use or mental health conditions or both. And he was someone, as I got to know him more, that I realized really had just started off in the traditional criminal justice system and the advocacy for treatment and the importance of rehab and reentry with boundaries and restrictions and rules was important. Anyway, as we get into this today, you'll see that he thinks a lot about things and he has had a ton of experience, I think like 30 years in the criminal justice system. And since he retired, I just thought it would be fun to pick his brain as he kind of looked back over his career and get a sense of what he thinks would be solutions to some of the things that we find ourselves having trouble with today in the criminal justice system. I think in another life, Mike could have been a professor. So he's really just easy to talk to and easy to listen to. So I hope you tune in and join us and enjoy this conversation with Mike. And thanks for listening. Welcome back and happy Tuesday, turkeys. How long have we known each other?
We've known each other for 2 decades.
I am not apologizing for who I am or what I like or the people that I love.
How do I be a wife? How do I be a mom? And how do I be myself and all of that? You didn't see that coming, did you?
All right, Mr. Mike, we are here to discuss, I guess, your career and your criminal justice experience and the whole shebang. So I figured I'd let you start with a bio, and then I'm just going to pick your brain.
Okay. Received my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And I got interested in that in criminal justice. Friday nights, me and my dad would sit there and watch Miami Vice. And we were in South Florida, or we'd watch Hill Street Blues when I was younger. Those are old Hill Street Blues. And I would always look at my dad and say, that should be my arrest. And he would just laugh. And I got interested in it. And along the way, I actually got a degree in legal assistance, which was paralegal. And one of the classes in paralegal was the criminal justice. So I really got interested in that. My family always wanted me to go to law school. I was the youngest of 7, and they were pushing me to law school. I'm thinking, you know what, I could do that, maybe do criminal law. And I applied to go to school out at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, where my sister lives, to law school. I had the check written, made the application out, and lo and behold, I run into my present wife. It's a long story, but we think we knew each other in high school, had classes together. She was with her group, I was with my group, some of the same people intermingled. Kind of started dating, and that application kind of got put aside. My dad kind of asked me, so are you going to go to law school? And the excuse I made was, well, I'm just tired of school, Dad. I've been in school for years. I did 1.5 years of legal assistance, and I'm just tired of it. And he didn't push. He was not a guy to push, And so I applied to the Department of Corrections, Probation and Parole. And I know Department of Corrections sounds weird, but that's where Probation and Parole Services came under in the state of Florida. And lady by the name of Valerie Roll took a chance on me and said, okay, well, you can come on in. I think she liked the fact that I had in college, I had 3.8 GPA average. I was like a sponge with some of that stuff. So she went ahead and she took a chance on me, and that pretty much started it. And
Did
later
you
on,
ever want to be like a traditional cop? Or how did you pick probation and parole first?
I did. In fact, I applied to the Jupiter, Florida, where I basically grew up. I applied to, to work with them. They accepted me on a contingent basis. Contingent being they would hire me to go to the police academy. Yeah. And I had to pay at the time, it was like $700 to go there. And I'm
You
like,
had to pay to go to the academy?
to go to this particular police department did. Yeah. And
Weird.
that was like tuition. Then I had to pay for the academy uniform, ammo, and all that. So it was going to be quite expensive. And I'm like, I don't know about this. And I started to look at cops and I'm like, I'm all but 5'1", for me to be driving around a car pulling somebody over, I'm like, maybe I should dip in probation and parole.
Yeah.
That's when I went. And it was funny because during the interview, I said, they told me, they said, you have a 12-week academy. And it was just as much as the academy for the law enforcement. And they said, it's in Vero Beach or Fort Lauderdale. So I said, okay. I said, well, how much does the academy cost? And her and Dom Monroe and the assistant was sitting there and they started laughing. And Ms. Roll said, you don't pay to go to our academy. You're hired. We actually use you before the next academy opens up and you collect a salary. I said, oh, okay. Okay. So that's how I ended up in probation and parole. I thought, well, that's fine. And I got hired in October of 1990. And I thought it was cool because right away I got a day off, and that was Veterans Day in November. I think, hey, I'm getting.
God.
So that's how I ended up in probation work. And I thought, okay, this is just going to be for a short time. I'll do this 3 or 4 years, and maybe I can get into a police thing.
Yeah.
And the academy that I did for probation parole may count, may not. But 30 and a half years later, I'm retired as a probation officer, so that didn't work out.
So how long were you with the state of Florida, and then when did you transition over to the federal side?
I was with the state of Florida 8.5.
Oh, there's a kitty.
I was with the state of Florida 8.5 years.
Okay.
It was my last year. I was actually a supervisor out in Belglade, which is also known as Fort Apache, the Bronx, because it was way away from the administrative office in West. Belglade is probably 50 miles away, and there's
Okay.
nothing there but sugarcane fields, rats, and criminals. That's about it. And some of the probation officers lived there, but some also drove in. And
Okay.
it was a hard transition to be a supervisor in that particular office. Dom Monroe got promoted to deputy, so he was my direct supervisor. And Don and Mitch Roll, I mean, they gave me a lot of support, even though it was far away. So I still, when I applied to the feds, when I got that phone call from Bob Jacobs, the gentleman that hired me, it was like a voice from above. I'm like, thank the Lord, here I go. I'm leaving. And I didn't tell anybody about it. And finally, my assistant, her name is Jack, came in the office and she kind of looked at me and said, are you leaving? And I thought, how did they know? So word must have got around some way, somehow. So it was 8.5 years with the state. And then I had 20 years and a half. So that's actually 31. I had 20 and a half years with the feds. Yeah, I stayed 6 months more than I did the whole Donna transition law.
And for context for the people, I'm trying to think how long you and I worked together, but I obviously came in at the tail end of your career.
Yes.
I was there for 5. So I probably worked with you for 4 of the 5 years, because I think maybe my last year-ish you were gone.
Yes. Yeah, I think it was the past 4 years. And I still remember, we were sitting in court with Judge and I referred to you as Kelly. I remember, I think that was me. I said that. And Judge Cobb looked over like, I looked at
I
you.
think you said Kelly Memick.
Yeah,
Neither first nor last name were correct.
we're correct. Yes, yes. Kelly mimic. I looked over at you and you just had your eyes closed. I'm like, okay, I didn't get that right. But it kept Judge Count on us.
So you've obviously had a long career. I don't know. I think criminal justice is something that everybody has big opinions about, and I thought it was cool. I thought it would be cool to talk to you because you've been in it for so long. You did it with the state, you did it with the feds, and you sat through I don't know how many administrations and all the swings that come with pro law enforcement and then more pro, I don't even know what the right word is, social programs or mental health. What was that like with the trends and the swings, and where do you feel like you kind of sit on the spectrum after having been through both sides of it?
I would have to say right now, after going through all of my career, I'm to the left of center. I'm more mental health, drug treatment than would be total law enforcement. Because I've just seen, even when I started, I was pro law enforcement. I mean, I was like, because in 1990, 1991, the drugs were a very bad factor. It was always get them off the street, get the drugs off the street. It was time when RICO first came in, Racketeering Influence Corruption Organization. The drugs were so bad, the federal government passed this RICO statute. It basically said we could take down an organization if we can prove it's a criminal organization that moves drugs, interstate compact, or anything even. I mean, they even used it for white collar stuff, for money and things like that. If it traveled through the state, they could take it down, or even if it didn't, all they had to do was prove a criminal organization existed. And I remember when I started, they had just took down a drug crime family in West Palm Beach that was responsible for almost 60-70% of the cocaine coming into that county. And the feds came in using RICO, took the family down. I still remember their name, but I'm not going to say it. And I remember going to court talking to a sheriff that was doing drug interdiction. And he had made the comment that, yeah, now we don't know what's going on in this county. And it was in reference to, like, if some crime happened, they would go there to that family and start and say what was going on, and they would find it out. And the family, it was a large family, was so big that they would actually sacrifice one or the other, put this one in jail for this time, let him come out, and they would just switch him in and out because the sentences for the state was only like 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. But when we came in, the sentences were 10, 20. So the sentences even got longer. And so it really broke up these crime families, And so did it make the drug worse, coming in, or by doing RICO? I don't know. I know, 8.5 years later when I left, drugs was still the main issue.
Yeah.
I don't think RICO really did anything.
Do you feel like I don't know if you would have experienced this, but do you feel like it destabilized the area at all with the vacuum that gets created when you take down an organization? Because the demand didn't go away. Like, what backfilled it?
Right. What backfilled it was these other gangs came in from other areas that they could now come into Palm Beach County. And it was all over. I mean, yes, they knew the demand was still there. I mean, the drug use was not going to stop. It's just, how do we get the drugs in there now?
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing, how it really exploded. And this was studying the drugs. It's all a matter of packaging and technique. Back in the 70s, you would have 2 kilos of cocaine or 1 kilo of cocaine, and it was hard to move because it was like a brick. Well, when they learned how to refine it and make it into crack, it was so easy to sell. And they would stand on the street corners, put it in their pocket, and they would use their hand and just drop it. So that increased the drug supply. And it was just a matter of the way they had refined it and packaged it.
Yeah. And then isn't the mechanism, like chemically in the brain, the mechanism of inhalation and the short duration of crack ended up being more addictive than powder cocaine?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. It hit that area in the brain right off the bat because they smoked it. And we still see that today, but with the opiate, with fentanyl, as opposed to heroin and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Fentanyl is just so more powerful, and the high is way up there, as opposed to what, heroin you would get from heroin. So yeah, it's still there. I mean, And I don't think it's ever going to really stop. And that's where the part of me is leaning on a little bit more to the left side, because it's like, you know, you need to put the money into drug treatment. And because there are a handful of people out there that do want to stop, they just don't know how.
Yeah.
And so if you can hit those people, fine. Those that you can't, sorry for them. They may end up dying of an overdose.
Yeah. What, if any, treatment options or like rehabilitation, re-entry did they have when you started back in the 90s? Was that even on people's radar, or were you just basically like babysitting them and making sure they got a job?
I felt like it started. The drug treatment sort of entered into that. When I came into the criminal justice system, they were still hitting law enforcement. And then you had this small area of rehabilitation that entered in to the stream. And when I was hired, I started with folks called Omar Road, and that was the administrative office. I met an author, and his name is Eleanor Leonard. He has since passed away,
Man.
and that was him. And he wrote a book called Maximum Bob. I'll get into who we think it was Maximum Bob was. Maximum Bob was about a judge, a hanging judge. His sentences were harsh and all that. And he was sort of like on the line of being legal and illegal. But he wrote a book, and it's centered around Palm Beach County. And this is how he describes Omar Road through the eyes of one of his characters, Elvin. He says, Elvin sat in Dr. Tommy's gray Lincoln across the street from the probation office, a queer-looking pink building, 2 stories, but hardly any windows in it. Maybe because the poor assholes getting questioned in there would pay attention and not be looking outside thinking of better places to be. So what you saw around here was all industrial places to work and the sound of the freeway close by. It was right off of I-95. Yeah, he kind of wrote it. And when he signed it for me, he made a little thing that says, Mike, you might recognize some of the places in here.
Dude, that's so cool.
That was one of them, yeah. And Maximum Bob, we think, was Judge Mounts, who was Eleanor Leonard's good friend. Excuse me. Judge Mounts is a very excellent judge, good character and all that, and very respected. And I'll get into what he did later on. But when I started on Omar Road, this lady, her name is Nicoletti Bruno, who's since passed away. She was the drug treatment lady.
Okay.
She was an Italian mom. So when she saw me on the Omar Road conference table, which is huge, we would sit there, and she saw me and she was like, I want to talk drug treatment to you. And let me say, I'm now the drug treatment coordinator here. And we're going to go to a place called CARP, Comprehensive Alcohol Rehabilitation Program. We're going to go there and we're going to get one of the contracts. And because we had really nothing to do but write post-sentence investigations, which was after conviction, we just would write a thing to the Bureau of Prisons about this person. So I went with her and met with CARP, and that was kind of how she pulled me into it. And I don't want to say pull me into it, but I think because she felt like, she was very motherly, and, here's this Italian kid, and, and so that, that kind of was my introduction into it. And with contracts and all that, what they had to go through. And she was a very good lady. Unfortunately, when we moved over to Fern Street, when I was actually a drug officer who moved over to Fern Street, she passed away from bladder cancer. Yeah, she was like 53 and she passed away.
Damn.
But she taught me a lot about drug treatment and things like that. And I think because she had a son that was in it, that's why she was kind of interested in it. She was a very nice lady. I worked with her for about a good 5-6 years.
Oh, okay. So that was kind of your intro into the whole like treatment world from the probation side.
And we had a judge that she wanted drug treatment. Her name was Mary Lupo. And Mary Lupo, she's famous because she tried the William Kennedy Smith case. If you go back and look, it was one of the Kennedys on the Kennedy compound at Mar-a-Lago was alleged rape. And he was found not guilty, but that's what she was famous for, Judge Lupo. She tried the case, but she wanted to send people to drug treatment. She She was the one that came up with offering a sentence of 10, 15, 20 years in prison, or you can go get drug treatment. Naturally, I'm sitting there looking at 10, 20 years, I'm going to get drug treatment. So you would be ordered to go into CARP, it's a residential program, and you would be assigned a probation officer to watch you in there. You would get with the counselors, make sure they did their treatment plan. And when they were released to outpatient, you would follow them for a while. If they were stable, then they would go to a regular officer. So that was kind of how I would see this work. And then I kind of went off to the academy thinking about drug treatment. And when I got out of the academy, I went to Mangonia Park and got a regular caseload. And right next door to me was a gentleman that really, I mean, if somebody really helped me through my career, it was this gentleman named Andre Griggs. And you have to understand, when I grew up as a Navy brat. So I was kind of like sheltered, you know. Andre Griggs is black, and I had people coming in, cases coming in, and this one girl, she came in, she was black, and she had announced that her aunt died, so she needed a travel permit to go to, I still think it was Atlanta, to go to her aunt's for the funeral. And I said, oh, okay. She brought verification and all that. And I said, so how long are you going to need? And she said, from this date, from this date. And it was like a week later. She said, I'm not going to leave until like a week later. And I'm like, you're not leaving for a week later. How much time are you going to need? She said, about 2 weeks. I said, 2 weeks? I said, that doesn't make sense. I said, why are you not going until a week? And I looked up, and all of a sudden there's Andres standing in the door, and he goes, Mike, can I talk to you? I said, yeah, Andres. I said, hold on 1 second. So I went, and he said, Mike, that's what our culture does. We have a huge family. And when someone passes away, it takes a while to get the family together. It takes a while for a burial. Oh, okay. He said, yeah, that's what she's saying. Okay. I said, okay. So I went back. I said, okay. And I went ahead and I approved the travel permit. And there was another case where this elderly man, he kept coming in. He had his written monthly report that they do. Nothing was on it. And he would come in, and no, this time he came in, and I kept saying, I said, why are you so late? They had to file it between the 1st and the 10th. And this was like on the 15th. I said, you're late. I said, you're never late. And he said, well, my daughter didn't get out of school, so I kept delaying it. She's staying over in school for math tutoring. I said, what? I said, but you could still come without your daughter? I said, you come with that. He was just like, look at me. There's Andra standing in the doorway. Where? I said, but he said, he can't read or write. I'm like, what? He said, yeah. He said, his daughter's out there with him filling out his monthly report. And I looked at his file, then we had paper files, and sure enough, it was beautiful handwriting. And I thought, yeah, he didn't fill this out. So I'm like, okay, sir, I'm sorry. I said, you can still come here. So you and I will fill this out together. So that's kind of the way he helped me. And also, Andre was studying to get his master's degree in drug counseling. He was a drug treatment coordinator. So that's how he kind of helped me along the way. And going back, there was one episode of that whole career that I had with the state. Judge Mounts had what was called a prison tour, to where he wanted us to know where we were sending people. He was like that. Yeah.
That's so smart. That's like making you get pepper sprayed if you're going to use pepper spray.
Exactly. And he was like, this prison, he called it a tour, but really, and it was. I mean, we would get in vans, buses, and we would go and see these prisons. And we would start at the work camps. It was Loxahatchee Road Prison, which is in West Palm. We started at that, then we went to a medium, and we eventually got up to Florida State Prison, and we toured death row, and we actually saw that. Then they had used the electric chair, and we were able to actually go into the chamber, it was there. And he stayed away from it. He was like a Methodist dad. Come to find out, we found out that he had like a person sitting on death row, so he didn't want to do that. But when we did that, they gave T-shirts out, and this was the T-shirt that says, It's a state prison.
My God.
The back of it says room service. Now, naturally, I've never wore it. You know, I never wore it, but that was like, it was like the highlight of my career. Not in a good way, but in a way that when I got back, I could really understand, like you said, now I know where these people are going.
Mm-hmm.
One of the places that we went had a drug program that they were just starting. And the guy sat down with us and he explained how the classification officers were looking for histories of drug use, and they were going to put them in these treatments in their treatment program. So lo and behold, I get back, and maybe a year later, not even a year later, maybe 6 months later, Andre Griggs moves over to the new administrative office on Fern Street to start. He was the first drug treatment officer we had in the district. Nicoletti Bruno was his supervisor. And they took another gentleman by the name of Bart Gladstone. He was in drug treatment. So Bart did a drug treatment center down in Fort Lauderdale. And I want to say it was, I don't remember the name of it. I think it's Drug Rehabilitation Treatment Center or something like DOC or something. But Andre did the Fort Lauderdale one, and Bart worked with the CART contract, and Letty oversaw that. Then all of a sudden, Sheriff Willie, started, it's actually pretty funny what they called it. They called it the Sheriff's Drug Farm. And it was an old barracks out in Belgrade. Judge Lupo filled that thing up with, you either go out to the Sheriff's Drug Farm and get drug treatment, or you're going to do 10 years in prison or 20 years in prison. She even had some life people that she would put out there. And I remember sitting in court, she sentenced someone to life, and she told them, she said, now you go over there and sit. Just sit over there in the jury box. Just wait. Well, we sit there and just see this guy's crying. And she went through her whole docket, and she brings this guy back. She said, now how does that feel? He's just got life. Good man. He's crying. She says, I'm going to send you to drug treatment if you want it. And he got perked up. And he was like, yeah. And she said, I'm going to send you to the Sheriff's Drug Farm. Well, what it was a boot camp. So it was only males could go out there. And they had an officer that, would run them every morning through the cornfields in Belgrade. And Letty then said, we need an officer to oversee these probation cases that are going out there. And I got the officer for it. So Letty shows up on my door. It's over in Amelia Park. I go, you want to come do drug treatment at the drug farm? I'm like, what? And I said, well, yeah, I guess I could do that. She said, yeah, you'll come over to Fern Street. We'll work with Andre and Bart. And Andre, that's right. And I said, yeah, let me go do that. So that's kind of how I started with the drug treatment stuff, and kind of looking at law enforcement drug treatment. I'm like, you know what? A lot of what we're doing is drug treatment and even mental health. We started seeing mental health cases put together with this, because it was just at the time when Reagan shut down the mental health hospitals and threw everybody literally out in the street.
Oh, the deinstitutionalization, that all happened. When was that? Early in the 90s? No.
That was in the 80s.
Okay.
But it took a while for us to start seeing it in the criminal justice system, like, hey, these mental health cases are ending up in prison because they got
that
no
makes
place.
Sense.
So we did all that. We did the drug treatment. The drug farm was eye-opening to see some of those guys. And I would go out there and I would drug test them, talk to them, go through their probation orders. And if they had some concerns, like some people had family members that passed away while they were out there. Some people couldn't do the physical conditioning. So we would take them through a modification or their probation, put them in like CART drug treatment or the one down in Fort Lauderdale, so they didn't have to do it. But we're doing overall good in the program.
Yeah.
And it had a very good success rate.
All right, that was part 1. This is part 1 of a 3-part series of my interview with Mikey. So join us next week, and we will hear more about the efficacy of some of these different programs and how Mike transitioned over to the federal side of probation.